Do you like to sing? Well, now's your opportunity. Join the Christmas choir. We're starting Tuesday, November 14th at 7 p.m. here at Lakeview Church. Everyone is welcome. And that's right, rehearsals have moved to Tuesdays. For more information, email choir@lakeviewchurch.com.
I've been coming to Cross Connect for 3 years, and being a big church, this is my way of getting to know people in the church, getting out on a Sunday night, and being around women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. So tonight we're going to be hearing from Gloria Reimer about spiritual gifts. Join us tonight at 6:30 in the theater to see what God has for you.
As me, if you know me, I have opinions on everything. If you ask me anything about a hot topic, I've got opinions. But as Christ followers, we need to engage as a community and put aside our knee-jerk preferences and look at hard, complicated topics as a generous, creative, gracious, compassionate, just, as God would. So I feel like as a community, we need to practice doing this together and lean into what does a creative, generous God look at this issue like? How can I practice that in community and then maybe practice that a little bit more outside of my community?
Last year in our teaching series on Leviticus, we touched on LGBTQ+ issues. Sexuality is one of those complicated issues in our world that the church is tasked with engaging. But it's also one of those spots where God wants to transform us as individuals, regardless of our sexual identity. And so we want to continue this conversation on November 9th from 7 to 9 p.m. with our guide, Graham Lauber from Journey Canada. Graham Lauber, you say? If you have questions, visit me, Allison, at the newsstand, or email me at allison@lakeviewchurch.com.
I decided to get baptized because I had had a relationship with Jesus for a long time. Naturally, it was the next step in my faith, but having the reservation about facing criticism or judgment was scary, and ultimately I had felt the push to do it. The day of my baptism was truly amazing, and it's really hard to put into words how I feel, but I feel like the best way to describe it is that I felt free. So for anybody considering baptism, I would say just do it, because not only is it a symbol of God's grace for us, it is an amazing beginning to an amazing journey.
If you're ready to announce your commitment to Jesus and join in the renewal of all things, baptisms are happening November 26th in both services. Class in preparation for this is November 16th from 7 to 9 p.m. Registration is required and you need to take the class to get baptized. So come and talk to me at the newsstand or email me at allison@lakeviewchurch.com.
Lakeview's annual general meeting is coming up November 5th, immediately following the second service. This is your opportunity to get an update on how Lakeview Church is doing and where we are headed. Everyone is welcome, but in order to vote, you need to be a member. Remember, Sunday, November 5th, following the second service. Thank you.
So this morning, we conclude our 5-week series in the story of Job, and I want to end things off by telling you a modern-day retelling of this story. And this modern-day retelling comes from the 2009 film by the Coen brothers entitled A Serious Man. This movie is about a guy, a Jewish man, Larry Gopnik. And poor Larry Gopnik, he is a physics professor at a community college, and his life is a series of unfortunate events. So badly that throughout the film, we hear him saying, "What's going on? What's going on? What's going on?" And it all starts here. His wife demands a divorce. And then one of his students tries to blackmail him for a passing grade. And then his neighbor infringes on his property line. And then his wife's lover dies, and he has to foot the bill for the funeral. And then his brother gets in trouble with the law, and he has to pay for that too. And then his boss shows up and says that his tenure is in jeopardy because he's getting anonymous hate mail. And then he gets in a car accident, and then he witnesses the death of his lawyer, and then he is forced to pay for a record subscription that he never signed up for. So Larry is at his wit's end, and he turns where any good Jewish boy would turn, to God. So he seeks out a rabbi. And the first rabbi he runs into is this young whippersnapper, this young buck who's wet behind the ears. He has just come out of rabbi school. And Larry sits with him, and the young buck says, "Cheer up, old man. Have some perspective. Everything's going to be just fine." But as you can probably tell, Larry, that just didn't sit well with him. That's not what he was looking for. So he went to a second rabbi, one that was a little bit more seasoned. And this time, he got a very cold response. A matter-of-fact answer that was along the lines of, "You cannot question God's plan. So suck it up, Buttercup." And once again, this is not what Larry was looking for. So Larry finds himself the very best rabbi he can find. This rabbi is sort of like a god-like figure. He's got a long, white, flowing beard. And this is what happened.
Please, I need help. I've already talked to the other rabbis, please. It's not about Danny's bar mitzvah. My boy Danny, this coming Shabbos, very joyous event, that's all fine. It's more about myself. I've had quite a bit at Tsuris lately. Marital problems, professional, you name it. This is not a frivolous request. This is I've tried to be a serious man, you know? Tried to do right, be a member of the community, raise the... Danny, Sarah, they both go to school, Hebrew school, a good breakfast. Well, Danny goes to Hebrew school. Sarah doesn't have time. She mostly washes her hair. Apparently, there are several steps involved, but you don't have to tell Marshak that. Just tell him I need help. Please? I need help.
The rabbi is busy.
He didn't look busy.
He's thinking.
The rabbi is thinking. And if the rabbi is the God-like figure, it almost seems like God has no time for Larry. Which is how some, if not all of us feel when our lives begin to crack and crumble, and we are powerless to stop it. So as we unpack this final message in this series of Job, I hope that you're able to make some new connections, real-time connections between your life and this story. And that somehow in the middle of whatever mess you find yourself in, you'll recognize that there's something new, even now, even today, to be discovered about God and about who you are. So this morning, Job, like Larry Gopnik, is going to plead his case one last time. And what we're going to get into here is Job worried about what other people are saying about him. He's worried about what other people are thinking about him and assuming about his life. And then he goes on to a rant to explain to God and to whoever will listen why he's actually okay, and why God should actually be paying attention to him, why he is a serious man. And it goes like this. This is Job's voice. "But now they mock me. Men younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to put with my sheepdogs. And now those young men mock me in song. But now I'm the one they're after, mistreating me, taunting me, and mocking me. They abhor me, they abuse me. How dare those scoundrels? They spit in my face. Now that God has undone me and left me in a heap, they hold nothing back. Anything goes. They come up at me from my blind side, trip me up, then jump on me when I'm down. And they throw every kind of obstacle in my path, determined to ruin me. And no one lifts a finger to help me. They violate my broken body, trample through the rubble of my ruined life. Terrors assault me, my dignity in shreds, salvation up in smoke. I made a solemn pact with myself never to undress a girl with my eyes. So what can I expect from God? What do I deserve from God Almighty above? Isn't calamity reserved for the wicked? Isn't disaster supposed to strike those who do wrong? Isn't God looking, observing how I live? Doesn't he mark every step that I take? Have I walked hand in hand with falsehood or hung out in the company of deceit? Have I ever been unfair to my employees when they brought a complaint to me? Have I ignored the needs of the poor, turned my back on the indignant, taken care of my own needs, and fed my own face while they languished? If I've ever used my strength and influence to take advantage of the unfortunate, hey, the fear of God has kept me from these things. How else could I ever face him? Job's in distress, and rightly so. Because in his world, in Middle Eastern society, honor, respect, reputation is everything. So after all that has happened, with his loss of power and position, the rumor mill is now churning, and people are saying all sorts of things about Job, and all that hate is coming at him in full force. So what do we see him doing? What's his knee-jerk reaction? He defends himself. Of course he does. He does what any of us would do. And he lists off all the evils and the offenses that he hasn't done. He's protesting that he's never indulged. He's never offended. And he's right. It's true. He's never done any of that bad stuff. But it doesn't quite seem to matter. Because now his story has taken on a life of its own. People have grabbed hold of it. They're making up their own minds. They have their own opinions. Truth and lies are indistinguishable. And notice that now in his talk back rant to God, what Job is actually saying is this. He's saying, God, I question whether you know how to run the world. Do you actually know what you're doing? He's questioning if God knows what he's doing or if he actually has any power at all. So if we hit time out right there, there's some pretty big pieces for you and I to consider. Maybe this will hit you. Why is it that when people say things about you and me that are untrue, we feel the need to defend ourselves to the death? Maybe the root question there is this: why do we care so much about how other people perceive us? Now take that same idea and just flip it over real quick and look at it from the opposite angle. Why is it that it's so easy to kick people when they're down? Why is it so easy to shoot our own wounded? Why does it sort of feel kind of good? You know, maybe a little bit rewarding, maybe really easy. Maybe we get a few good laughs out of it when we mock others and we think about their situation and we say, ha, look at what's happened to them. Why is it so easy to do it to someone else while we would hate it if someone would do it to us? Or maybe the question out of this section of text this morning for you is this: why is it when everything in your life is just going peachy, it's just great and amazing, that God is obviously in control? But what about when your life is going sideways or it's tanking? Why is it that in those moments we say, well, obviously God doesn't know what he's doing? Why do we flip-flop like that? What Job is dealing with is what we continue to deal with as a species. And these are questions that God's about to respond to Job, but listen to them closely because the response is also for you this morning. God's words are about to be introduced by a new character. His name is Elihu. Why would you introduce a new character so late in the game? I don't know. I wouldn't have written it that way. But then again, I've never written a biblical book, so it's really not up to me. But in my best estimation, my best guess, it's this, is that Elihu shows up as the opening act. He's the warm-up to get us ready for what God is about to say. Because what God is about to say, while being truthful, is also harsh, and he's going to be brutally blunt. Elihu warms us up by saying this, that God hurls arrows of light, taking sure and accurate aim. The high God roars in the thunder, angry against evil. Listen to it. Listen to his thunder, the rolling, rumbling thunder of his voice. He lets loose his lightnings from the horizon to horizon, lighting up the earth from pole to pole. In their wake, the thunder echoes his voice, powerful and majestic. He lets out all the stops. He holds nothing back. No one can mistake that voice. And now finally, Yahweh answers Job from the eye of the violent storm. And he said, "Why do you confuse the issue? Why do you talk without knowing what you're talking about? Pull yourself together, Job, up on your feet, stand tall. I have some questions for you, and I want some straight answers. Where were you when I created the earth? Tell me, since you know so much. Who decided on its size? Certainly you'll know that. Who came up with the blueprints and the measurements? How was the foundation poured? And who set the cornerstone? While the morning stars sang in chorus and all the angels shouted praise. And who took charge of the ocean when it gushed forth like a baby from the womb? That was me. I wrapped it in soft clouds and tucked it in safely at night. Then I made a playpen for it, a strong playpen so it couldn't run loose, and said, stay here. This is your place. Your wild tantrums are confined to this place. So now, towards the end of this tale, God finally does show up. And how does he show up? He shows up in the storm. Sometimes God shows up in that still small voice, but other times in the Old Testament, he comes out with fists and fury. And notice, he has no sympathy for Job. What does Job get instead? Sarcasm, which is awesome because that's my spiritual gift. Because I'm the best, right? Right. Check it out. That God blasts Job. I almost picture it like he sort of goes down in crouched position here with his hands on his knees, and he says something like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did you create the universe? Did you hang the stars? Did you put everything? Did you look after absolutely everything? Oh, it wasn't you? Well, who was it? Oh, I know. It was me. He doesn't treat Job like a charity case. Job is talking to God as if they are equals. So God obliges the favor and says, you want to be equals? Then I'll talk to you and I will hold nothing back. And it's weird in this episode because you think this would have been the opportunity for God to let Job in as to what happened. He could have said something like, Job, listen, man, I know it's been a crazy few years, but check it out. Like 40 chapters ago, me and the devil, we were hanging out, we had a little wager going, one thing leads to another, and here we are. But he doesn't. He doesn't mention any of that. So maybe the challenge that is before Job this morning is the same truth that faces us. And it's this, that as God's creation, as his subjects, we are called to submit to God, even if we don't have or don't know the rationale for what he does. Why? Because this universe and this world is his. All of this is up to him and not us. All of it is under his control and not ours. Which is sort of like the way that movie A Serious Man ends. A huge storm rolls in. At his kid's school, the teachers try to get the kids into the storm shelter. When at that exact same moment, Larry gets a concerning phone call from his doctor. It's about the x-ray he just had, and the news is not good. And for some reason, these are my favorite scenes of this whole movie. Why? Because they are so cut and dry. Because there is no getting away from the storm's path, and there's no getting away from the doctor's diagnosis. So this section of the story presents us with some bigger things to think about as well. Maybe you need to think about this. Are you okay? Do you recognize that this whole world is not up to you? None of it is really in your control. So will you and I go through life questioning the way God exercises his authority? Or will we submit and will we trust him even if we are short on the answers that we want? Or maybe this is the piece you have to wrestle with. Are you trying to tame God? Or are we trying to tame the one who tamed the oceans? Or are we allowing ourselves to be tamed by him? Or maybe try this one on for size. Are you okay with a God that isn't always a plush teddy bear? A God that at times comes at you hard and in a harsh manner, sometimes being sarcastic, sometimes showing up like a storm? Is it possible that God shows up in this way, maybe, just maybe, because sometimes it's the only way that he can get your attention? I feel like when God shows up in this way, it's tough love. But the tough love we see with Job and for us, it's not the end point. It's not the end of the story. I think the tough love is actually pointing to a bigger picture. What is that bigger picture? We got a teeny tiny clue right before God went on his last rant here. It says, the one who starts speaking is Yahweh. In your Bible, it might say the Lord in those capital letters that are kind of smushed down. What does Yahweh mean? Yahweh is the name for God that is very personal, like a parent would have a relationship with his or her child. I mean, it still carries this feeling of absoluteness, that God is eternal, that he's this unchanging creator of the universe. But there's also this caring bit between Yahweh and his children. It's like a less formal way of acknowledging him. Like, think about it like this. If you didn't know me and I didn't know you and you were introducing yourself to me, you would say, "Hello, Mr. Manifo," and you would shake my hand. And you would say, "Oh, hello, Reverend Manifo," because to you it's Reverend Manifo. You got that? I'm kidding, right? Mr. Manifo, Reverend Manifo, either one of those works. But at my house, no one calls me Mr. At my house, nobody calls me Reverend. You know what I get mostly at my house? Dad. 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 This is the same feel we get here. Yahweh is dad. Yeah, he's your dad, but he's also your dad. That's who's speaking in this big, long rant, this tough love rant. So what's Yahweh's big picture? What's dad's big picture? Well, it's the happy ending, of course. After God had finished addressing Job, he turned to Eliphaz, the Temanite, and said, "I've had it with you and your two friends. I'm fed up. You haven't been honest either with me or about me, not the way my friend Job has. So here's what you must do. Take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my friend Job. Sacrifice a burnt offering on your own behalf. My friend Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer. He will ask me not to treat you as you deserve for talking nonsense about me and for not being honest with me as he has." And they did it. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite did what God commanded, and God accepted Job's prayer. After Job had interceded for his friends, God restored his fortune and then doubled it. All his brothers and sisters and friends came to his house and celebrated. And they told him how sorry they were and consoled him for all the trouble that God had brought him. And each of them brought generous house-warming gifts that he probably put in a closet or re-gifted later on. So a couple of things hit me so hard this week when I read this passage, and I hope it hits you. I hope it touches you where it counts this morning. First, notice this. Notice when Job is restored. What's the timeline there? Job is restored after he prays for his friends who really haven't been his good friends all along. There is something to that time sequence. The way to Yahweh's happy ending has got to be a win-win for everyone. A change of heart, where enemies are loved and interceded for, where grace is unconditional, and where broken relationships are restored. Second thing to maybe notice here is this. We read this passage and Job gets this happy ending, but this happy ending sort of has an asterisk beside it for me. You know, kind of like when Barry Bonds won the home run record. Remember Barry Bonds? Like, he won the home run record, but everyone knows he was juicing, right? So he won it, but did he really win it? So there's an asterisk beside his name in the MLB record books. I think there's an asterisk beside this happy ending as well. Sure, the story goes on to say that his fortunes are all restored, they increase. Later it says he goes on to live another 140 years. He gets new kids, he gets grandkids, he's looked after, he dies an old man full of life with new fortunes and a new family. But when I read the ending to that story, the question I have is, well, what about the other family? Well, what about those other kids, your first kids, the ones that can't or weren't replaced? To me, there's an asterisk behind this happy ending because it's not quite complete. It's a partial happy ending for now, with the full happy ending coming later, where families will be reunited, where the sick will be made well, and where everything will be made right. And the word that the church has always used for this reality is resurrection. So for those of us here this morning who identify as followers of Jesus, this is our hope. This is the now and the not yet of God's kingdom. That in the middle of whatever mess you find yourself, look for those glimmers of the happy ending, of what it's going to look like. And then sit tight, hold on, in expectation for the full happy ending that is on its way. So to you this morning, my brothers and sisters, I urge you to hang on to this assurance. Look for the glimmers of the happy ending in the middle of your mess, but live with hope and security and expectation that Jesus is coming back and he will one day make everything right. So with that, I want you to stay seated. I'm going to invite a couple of friends out here. We're not only going to help cap off this morning's message, but cap off this series. So as they sing or perform this next number for you, the point for you is to take it in and allow what the Spirit has been speaking to you to just gestate, whatever direction that's in. Let's see where he takes you.
For now, we see but a glimpse, hints of heaven falling. Crawling through this burning bush, we push through broken boards in the fence, praying that one day it will all make sense. And you've heard that there'd be footprints in the sand, but life feels more like beating concrete imprints in our hands. So go ahead and try to understand God's plans, or take it from those who walk with a limp. a simple understanding. Man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. So trust me, one day it will all make sense as we stand in his presence.
Soon and very soon we are gonna see the King. Soon and very soon we are gonna see the King.
So let your tears fall. Your agony pierce heaven's wall. Call out in distress and press into the dark places of the soul. For now we cry, devastated by internal drought, our worry seeds doubt. For we see with veiled faces, temperatures rise and fall, but the season never changes. The rain erases maps drawn on sidewalks. We hopscotch life's path, only to find the rock stops on the square that holds all our hope. But the time is soon to come when all our suffering will be undone.
No more crying now, we are gonna see the King. No more crying there, we are gonna see the King.
One day, the thistles and thorns will be removed, and one day, the caverns and caves will be explained. One day, the mountains of mayhem will be moved, and one day, you'll see fully God's glory, the binding of our story.
Soon and very soon we are gonna see the King. Soon and very soon we are gonna see the King. No more crying there, we are gonna see the King. Hallelujah,
Soon and very soon we're going to see the King, or as Job put it, God's name ever be blessed. God gives, God takes away. It doesn't matter, ever his name be blessed. So in response to all we've heard this morning, will you stand with us and worship?